can start. I see a lot of people I recognize, and then a lot I don't, of course, and I don't see everybody. I know there are some of you from other countries even, and so I'm really happy to be doing this. I think you all know we don't, well, I haven't done a web-based thing like this in a teaching format. We're doing this mostly to introduce people to some of the central perspective that we have in our work, and in a format where we're doing an actual meeting the way usually we do them in our teaching groups or ongoing groups, so that you get a sense of how we go about teaching. And then, of course, I'll be teaching something, so you get some of the how and the what. So I guess I should introduce myself a little bit. Not all of you know me. My name's Duncan. I grew up in Boston, actually, in the suburbs of Boston in the 50s and 60s. So we were kind of discussing before we started recording. I moved to Colorado in the early 70s and spent a few years in well, I came here for graduate school and spent a few years in biosciences. I worked at CU Med School and NJH, a local immunology center here. And around the same time, while I was actually in postdoc work, I became involved in exploring myself in this work. I had a friend who told me about this group that was starting and seemed just exactly something I was interested in, and thought so, and so checked it out. I ended up being one of the original 10 students or so that started right around 2000, right around 1976. And so originally there were 10 or so of us, and now there are a few thousand, various places around the world. And I guess we have approximately 200 teachers who are either actively teaching or in training to teach. So we've come a long way. Now, so this is an interesting situation to be teaching this way. We go from 10 people to teaching, potentially hundreds through some kind of technology. Not that that's the intention to teach this way. Mostly the groups encourage them to be in-person groups. So this is a way to introduce what we do, and so you get a taste for it. Well, time for questions and so on as we go. So I worked as a research guy, as I was saying, for about 7 or 8 years, and at some point came to the conclusion that being an ongoing science guy wasn't really for me. So starting in the late 70s, I started training with this school, and I've been teaching it now since the early 80s. So I moved around a bunch. I didn't move my home. I've lived here in Colorado all this time, Denver for many years, and in Boulder for the last 24. I have taught groups in several interesting places. One, Fourth Way School in West Virginia, I worked with for a few years. Worked in Europe for a few years, maybe 10 or so, starting in the early 90s. I've been married since 93. I've got 2 kids, and teaching in Boston since approximately 1995. I believe it was October 1995. I was kind of reviewing a little bit of this. So in the Boston area, there are 4 groups by now, and the 4th one is still open. These groups start every few years, and so we do have space for people who want to engage what we do in the Boston area now. And same in Colorado. We've started, there's a group that's sort of informative time now here in Boulder. So people in both those areas, and I don't know, far and wide, I guess this announcement went. So There are some of you in places I'm not even sure where you are. So, as I said, we're having this meeting at this time, so both East Coast of this country and Colorado can engage it. So today, as I said earlier, we planned a meeting that's typical of the kind of meetings we use in our school. So we'll start with, there'll be a talk for 30 minutes or so. Then we'll break you up into smaller groups of 2 or 3 to explore on your own subject matter that I'm going to be talking about. And, you'll see. Many of you, of course, are familiar, but many of you aren't. So the kind of exercises we do are for each of you to explore this material in your own life, your own experience. How is it relevant for you? Because obviously that's where the main event is happening. So then we'll come back after that exercise, and Greg will describe how the grouping of you, somehow technology is going to send you into little rooms by yourself to, with another person to just explore something in a way that I'll describe carefully. And, we'll find that we learn a lot from each other just in doing those exercises. You learn a lot about yourself. You also learn about yourself by listening to what someone else is exploring. Typically in our, and then at the end, we'll come back for some questions and conversation, comments, and answer questions we have. And we'll probably have 45 minutes or so for that. Typically, we start with a meditation of 20, 30 minutes. I thought this morning we'll just start with just a few minutes, short few minutes, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, just to settle. The meditation we usually do in the beginning has a kind of settling, quieting, paying attention to the breath, and the idea of being, we all kind of, settle deeper into what we know or what we are. So we'll do that now, just for a few minutes. And so you can just pay attention to your breath. You could sit with eyes closed if you want to. Meditation. Just for a few minutes, and then I have a bell. I'll ring a bell. After a few minutes, we'll come back. We'll take a couple minutes, and then I'll start talking a bit. Okay? So I'll actually ring a bell, little bell to start. Okay. Is everybody hearing okay? Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so one might think we start to teach something that's, introductory and light. Uh, as I got into working on this, preparing for this and thinking about it, something I have, you know, constantly teaching about in our school, the subject of truth and what is the truth and how is truth for us. I mean, central always through it all. And yet I think mostly for those of us who start without having the kind of sense of how central our orientation to truth, our relationship to truth, and how important it is, often, I think for most people, I won't say for this particular field of people, you're all tuned in here and interested, you wouldn't be here if you're not interested in this topic of truth compass, right? As you think about just starting with how do we even think of truth as a society, as individuals, as human beings who've grown up from, so many years and grown up from being little kids into adulthood and so on. What's our relationship to truth? How do we even think about it? And I think largely in the back of our mind someplace, if not in a dominant part of our mind, the truth generally, I think, isn't, say, is interpreted or understood in familiar ways such that we can't help but associate truth to being just, you know, some kind of a thing, a concept, you know. Most of us will have a sense of truth being painful, for instance. What is the truth? And how is truth represented and used in our growing up formative years? Let's get to the truth here. You know, what is the truth? You're in trouble if you don't tell the truth. So the truth could be associated to, you know, punishment as a kid, can be thought of as a good thing, of course, but a lot of the time there are elements to us in growing up where, you know, we want to do our own thing. And sometimes when we wanted to do our own thing, we got in trouble for it and punished for it, whatever. So we might think of the truth too, you know, as a science guy, you know, the truth was central to exploring reality. It might have been exploring the reality of cell surface proteins and receptors and so on, but nevertheless, there's a sense of, you know, it's a thing. It's a something we strive for, something we're interested in. In the science world, I think we could have the sense that when there's a question, when there's something unknown, there's a kind of unsettledness, like, I don't know how that particular system is working, and it's an important thing for me to know. There's something inside you that just kind of feels unsettled. It's like it bothers you. You don't completely understand, how does this thing work? Mm-hmm. So we could think of the truth that way. And we could, so I said, think of it as like emotionally, deeply feel it as something to be avoided, maybe. We all have different kind of relationship. I'm trying to sort of bring out different ways we might think of truth, different ways truth has been held by us, different ways it was used with us in our environment. Was the truth something that's really supported? Like really finding out, where are you? How do you really deeply feel about this thing that happened on the playground? And, you know, like that. Usually, I think, for most of us growing up, it's kind of a loaded question. It's a loaded concept. You know, we don't tend to think of the truth as our friend. You know, it's not easy to see the truth as our best friend. Think of a situation where you might have been in the thick of a particular argument with someone. You felt yourself holding back, wanting your view to be the one that's the right one or understood. So you had this particular fight with somebody. A lot of times it happens in relationships, of course. Could be with a friendship, could be an intimate relationship. You know, they say every intimate relationship has its major fights, you know, certain ones. You've asked people in, you know, intimate relationships, say, yeah, there's this one place, you know. or there might be a few, but the point is that you have some kind of situation where there's a constant sense of unsettledness and could manifest as a vigilance, a sense of holding on in a particular way to your particular view in this particular situation. And, all relationships have these someplace. And so, but at some point, one of those might really come to a head and finally, you really have to go into it. You really have to, figure out what's really happening here. How many of us have the experience of once in a while, you just sort of stop and get off it, get off your position, like something in you wants to recognize, something in you can actually get off it and sense, oh no, I was really holding on to a particular thing here. And when you do that, something in you just kind of relaxes in a deep way. Think of it as I finally saw I was really full of shit in this particular area, this particular thing. I was holding on to this thing. I don't have to understand what all the background to it is. I don't have to, inquire into it, figure it all out. But you have that moment, that recognition, where something in you completely lets go and relaxes. When you feel it as really, 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 really important to you, it's like there's a kind of settling and a kind of inner, it's a peacefulness that comes along with maybe more unsettledness of some kind, because there might be other places and other things you recognize that aren't settled. Nothing's settled. The whole thing isn't necessarily settled, but you finally see through that particular thing. You recognize that something in you can settle so deeply that you land in a different place. That if we pay attention, you land in a place where there's relaxation of sorts, but actually you could feel it as a kind of presence. It's not just you settled and relaxed, it also could feel like there's something else here that's supporting you, right? And you might recognize that as just the truth. I faced the truth of the particular situation. I was holding on, I was being this way, being that way, and just letting go, recognizing that truth, let you settle. But at the same time, you could feel much supported by something. You could feel as some kind of field. You could feel it as presence. You could feel it as a solid presence of some kind. You might feel it as a heartfelt kind of opening and settling. But usually, in the beginning, you just feel it as a settling into presence. You feel there's some kind of a presence. Now, how much can we, we can't forget, we can't avoid the importance of that experience. Recognizing when I am oriented in that way to really seeing the truth of the situation, there's a settling that you feel as a landing in presence, and you feel a kind of truthful aura all around you. You could feel it that way. And if we pay attention, we'll feel that. We'll recognize the importance of it, the value of it. And we might find that we feel much more at home, for instance. That kind of settling that kind of letting go and relaxing. And it's not a relaxing like having some, couple beers and watching TV. This is a kind of a relaxing where you feel more authentic. And truth, of course, has to do with authenticity. So, but here, it's like your whole soul, your whole organism feel like it got shaken up and moved around and dropped and settled and more open, more contemplative, maybe, whatever it is. See, we all might feel a little bit differently. But settling and relaxing are part of that for everybody. You feel it that way. Now, in that sort of ground, we become, interested, or we might become interested in those deeper existential questions that arise for us, right? Who am I? What am I? When we're holding on to and behaving through and feeling we know ourselves through our usual personality self and the thing that we do and the things we hold on to and have this capacity and this, that, and so on, and we're sort of, in our running around and doing all of our stuff mode, then we're not contemplative in this way. We're not, let's say, explorative in this way. We're not open in this way. We're identified. We're identified with that running around person doing what he needs to do, get things done, and so on and so forth. But when we have that opportunity, once in a while, to get hit like that, some kind of truth lands, and you settle that way, that's a whole different universe of sorts, right? It's like, okay. Could feel like a universe you don't know yet, but you feel it as true. You feel yourself as more authentic, even though you might not even know what that is. What you really know is you've gotten some distance from that positioned, identified one that likes to fight about, or hold their position to one thing or another. So that's what I mean about the truth being our friend, our best friend. Because if we're oriented to it, it will help to guide us more and more to that more settled condition. Because obviously, we think we all know, we're here to know, we're all filled with all kinds of ideas and images and beliefs and keep us running around and positioned one way or another. And it's definitely not necessary that our life cycle contains that all the way to the end, that we can't know ourselves in a far more interesting way. So the questions of who am I, or what am I, all those philosophical questions, but highly personal, important, deep questions we have. What's what here? See? So if we're asking what's what, what's really happening, what's really true, we need to have some kind of direction, some kind of a compass, something in us, some kind of soul instrument, let's say. I like to think of the sort of our soul is like all of our experience. Whatever experience happens in the soul, and our soul can become conditioned one way or another, can become oriented to doing, can be impressed to believe. It's so many different things. Mostly our soul in its personality form has all kind of beliefs about its deficiencies or its difficulties, its what it does wrong, what it could do better, all of which we'll say isn't a bad thing. Of course, we we want to grow and develop and be everything we could be. That's sort of built in and important to the human soul. Not everybody goes that direction. Not everybody has this sort of interest. But those of us that do, we have some kind of instrument in us that can tell what's the right direction. Or more, sometimes I think of it like it can detect the wrong direction. You know, and I say the wrong direction, it's not a moralistic right or wrong, it's more a truthful thing. You know, what's the truth here? What's really the truth? So when you're in the midst of that argument you've had with your loved one for 10 years, whatever, you finally figure it out, you know, you finally get off it. There was something in you that went, oh, no, this life's too short. We've got to really see what the hell's going on here. And something in you then has been able to detect that. It goes, oh, this is wrong. I'm always going this way, but I want to be here. You know, so at some point you, okay, the jig's up. And that's where this big relay. Now that depends on having some kind of instrument. Depends on having some kind of inner compass. And so the way I think of it is that our soul has that. Every human soul has it. It has the capacity to know the wrong direction. I don't think that wrong direction thing is something that's developed in childhood with people telling you, no, don't do that. You know, I mean, I think we can learn some from well-attuned, you know, environment, parents, parental figures, people around us who we respect and love, that we learn if they are very truthful, kind of, right? But largely, a lot of what happens in childhood, as I said before, we get, you know, judged or, you know, hurt or misrepresented, not seen accurately, and so on. So we have all kinds of feeling states and that get embedded in our worldview. And those are what creates the positions and the beliefs and the sort of characterological habits that need to be worked out, mostly because we tend to identify with them and take ourselves to be that. So now we're back to the question, who am I? What am I actually? Right? So we have this instrument. I think everybody's got it. You can have this sense of directionality. You know, sometimes I think of it as that it knows true north. The compass knows true north, and it's contented when it's headed in that direction. And what it really can detect is when you're sort of going off. If you, no, that's not right. And I see that all the time. I see it with my own kids. You know, they have a sense of truth, which isn't something I taught them for sure. And sometimes, you know, they'll call you on something you're not aware of. It happens to me too. I'm a 15-year-old now, so, you know, so go, wait a minute, you know, they have it. They know when something is actually a little off. That's not exactly right, Dad. You know, yeah, that's true. So I think it's something we all have, something we all want to develop more and more, we want to use. So back to, you know, this little introductory thing about the diamond approach. This is a central piece. It's a central capacity that we need to get clear with. We need to really understand. We really need to want to, you know, engage and use and work with, because we work with it for always, the rest of our life, really. So it's important to really get and really understand what is our relationship to it. So what's our relationship to truth will be part of it. And how much do we use or follow the truth that we know? Because I think a lot of the time we tend to ignore the truth that we know. right? So one of those things that is elephant in the room is how much we all tend to go along with the untruth of the world. Uh, you know, how much of the time, or how many times do we have a sense that you're in a social situation of one kind or another, and there's something happening that you feel it's off, right? But we don't do much with it. We let it go by. We might do it in a work situation. You might feel that, well, it's not appropriate for me to challenge this particular guy because X, Y, or Z might happen. I challenge my boss, or I'm supposed to be the one who doesn't know as much as them, or, you know, so many different elements, different situations, we will tend to back off and kind of let it go. Now, of course, there are times where it probably is best to let something go, right? But we also need to be intelligent about it. There are also a lot of times when we just let it go by because, oh, well, if I challenge that, I won't be really part of the situation here. I'll be rejected, or I'll be seen as too, you know, as challenging, or I won't be feminine, or I'll be too aggressive, or, you know. So tons of times, I'm sure all of us could find where we tend to betray the truth that we know. And that doesn't mean, of course, that everybody should be running around telling everybody what the truth is for them. You know, I hear people saying, well, that's my truth. You know, that's another way that our relationship to truth can get kind of distorted and actually get us in more trouble. You know, what do you mean it's your truth? You know, so all of a sudden it's your truth, and so you're asserting your truth, and all that stuff. There's a way, though, to hold the truth and to recognize the truth and what direction you actually need to or want to go that has more intelligence to it than that. That has a sense of, you know, holding a particular situation and right, and then following it in a way that's actually effective. Okay, but first we want to understand what is our relationship to the truth and how much we do, how much we might betray ourselves, because when betraying the truth is no different from betraying yourself. Because remember, ultimately, in that place where you just settled and you're recognizing the truth and you experience that presence, that's more you, for sure, than anything else, of all of the running around and the self-images and beliefs and all of that. So betraying the truth is like betraying yourself. You are the truth, really, ultimately. People say those kind of things, right? It's a spiritual speak to say you are the truth. You are. You're much more yourself when you're settled and relaxed and open and truthful and explorative, interested. You know? So, not to be overly dramatic, it is a matter of life and death. Because when you are in that settled real place, you're alive. And being around people and around someone, being able to interact in a way through and with that kind of truth and truthfulness is enlivening, is compelling in a way that's not exactly compelling like figuring out a science problem. Figuring out a science problem and really understanding how something works and figuring out actually in a way that really benefits humanity. You know, you figure out something, I mean, that happens all the time. just basic science leads to development of, I have a friend who's building the super drug that's antibiotic that's going to be effective for all bugs, the super bugs, everything. So this is really amazing thing. So that could be really satisfying, of course, that kind of thing. But what I'm also talking about more is the kind of inner satisfaction and the kind of importance of our actual life being a kind of life where what we are is understood. I might be really, excited and, to figure out something that benefits other people, but I won't, it won't be the same as understanding my own source. Dropping into that and in a way that isn't just compelling. It's, just to think of it, you start to kind of fade away and disappear in a certain way. That it's not exactly compelling. It's more like that relaxation going to an endpoint, and which is part of our potential. So I thought today, I hit it pretty close. Talked to you for about 30 minutes. I thought we will do a couple of exercises to explore our relationship to truth in a way. And at the same time, exercise this capacity for what I'm calling the compass, guidance, truth compass. The truth compass, for those of you, have studied our work a lot, so very similar to what we refer to as diamond guidance, some kind of guidance. It's a guidance, that's all, just knows, could tell, okay, this is more the direction. That's the direction I'm going to explore. That's the thing I want to understand. So it doesn't mean you always know the truth. It means you know when you don't know the truth and you want to know the truth, and so you're guided to explore further. So that's what this compass does. And the interest in the truth, of course, exploring and finding out. That's two of the main features of our perspective in the diamond approach. So what we're going to do is a couple of repeating questions. Now, I'm thinking most of you, I'm seeing I've seen the faces I know. I don't know what the percentage is of people I don't know or who haven't engaged in exercise like this. So I'm going to describe it a little bit. We'll do repeated questions where you be in groups of two, and Greg will tell you about this. He's going to put you into groups of two. You can opt in or opt out. You can, if you don't want to do this exploration, you don't have to. I highly encourage you to do it, even if you, aren't sure about it. I wasn't sure about it. I did it anyway, and all of a sudden I'm realizing, wow, this is an important and valuable and powerful way to learn something, to explore something kind of emotionally relevant for my life. So these particular questions, I'll tell you what the first question is, and then I'll help you understand why and how we do it. So the repeating question is, what's right about avoiding the truth? So I described how we might tend to avoid the truth. We might tend to look the other way. We might tend to not want to say the truth. We might want to tend to not see what's off or what's happening around us, and it can be in social, business situations, just anywhere. Right? So what's right about avoiding the truth? So you're in groups of two, and one of you asks the other, what's right about avoiding the truth? And you answer spontaneously. Person then answers. You say, I don't know about the truth. I'm afraid of the truth. Okay. And then the person who asks says, thank you, and asks the question again. What's right about avoiding the truth? The truth hurts. Thank you. What's right about avoiding the truth? Truth is okay in some circumstances, but other places, I'm not so sure. Thank you. What's right about avoiding the truth? Well, if I confront the truth, I'm going to get, rejected, or whatever it is that comes for you, because obviously it's relevant for you. It's relevant for your personal history, whatever your relationship to truth has been. And so with this question, we're just unearthing those thoughts, those associations, those, whatever it is that obstructs your own clean, clear relationship to truth to show itself. So this is important. What's right about avoiding the truth? So you do that exercise. Each person answers that question for 15 minutes. Then you switch, and the other person asks the first person, the same question for 15. So that question takes 30 minutes for both of you to do together. And when you're doing the exercise also, it's important to remember that the person asking the question isn't there to sort of steer the direction of the person answering in any particular way. So it's better if you're not like nodding your head and going, oh yeah, that's good, I know that one, because that will tend to influence the direction the person takes. I don't mean you have to just sit there like a robot either, right? You're a human being too, but you're just asking the question in a fresh way each time, okay? So that's the form. And now there'll be a second repeating question that you're going to do. So after you finish the first one, the exercise, the question is, tell me something you could be more truthful about. Okay? So you're going to look at your out of your own life. There's probably something going on for you you could be more truthful about. So this is a way to use this compass, right? So we're doing two things: to look at our relationship to truth, and then how could we navigate it better? So that's the second question. Tell me something you could be more truthful about. It might be, well, I could get off this certain perspective about blah, blah. Thank you. I could assert myself more. Usually I don't think I can. Thank you. Whatever it is, and it's going to be wildly different for everyone. Okay, so that's the exercise we'll do. That will take a full hour. And then we'll come back here and we'll have some conversation. We'll see what kind of questions you might have, comments you might have. And I look forward to that. We're going to learn something in every segment here. So, Greg, do you want to explain the business of the...
Do you want to, before I do that, did you want to see if there's any questions about actually doing the exercise, or?
Sure, good idea.
Okay. I'll just, yeah. So if anyone has a question before I go into the technical piece of creating the breakout rooms, just take a moment to see. And if you do have a question, you'll need to unmute yourself. So the mute button's on the bottom left of your screen, most likely.
Yeah, good.
So I'm going to stop the recording here.